is like really have the panelists is really packed of powerful people with so much years of experience and with various experience in different sectors. I would like to say welcome to all our panelists and all the people listening in. So the first question is, what does it mean to scale innovation in Africa agriculture, and how do we accelerate or scale these ideas up?
Okay, thank you very much, Samirah. You know, when I first got the topic for the webinar, I was very happy, and I'll tell you why. Because of the word scale. That word has been used over and over again, and we're now even having a new variant of the word. Some persons will prefer to say scale out, while some other persons will prefer to say scale up. Of course, I have been thinking of the best way to explain this as it concerns agriculture in Africa. I'm happy to do that now. I can see we have a lot of young people on the call, especially students of agriculture. So this is a good way to start. So in order not to bore you with the whole big grammar or with the Turenchi, like they say in northern Nigeria. So scale is very simple. Scale just means expansion. You want to get to a level where you make more impact. You want to reach out to more persons or more people. You want a spread, be it, it can be a geographical spread, or it can be a spread in terms of partnership, or a spread in terms of reaching out to certain stakeholders. Now, a simple example of this is, your name is Mohammed Musa, you are in somewhere in Zungeru, and you've got this novel idea in you, and you want to see how somebody in Enugu, for example, Uchenna in Enugu, can also benefit from this idea, or somebody in Ghana or any part of the world can benefit from this idea. So what do you do to take this idea out of your head if it's still in ideation stage, or if you're a small business, how do you expand so that somebody far from you can be impacted by what you do? And it's not just being impacted, also you should be able to put money in your pocket. So in terms of agricultural scaling, in terms of agriculture in Africa, it's best we consider it in two variants, like I said initially. But this time we will be looking, it's good we look at the vertical scaling up. This has to do with institutions. It is actually institutional in nature. I'm trying not to be too academic here. So what this means is you want to expand higher up the ladder, to involve other sectors, stakeholders, organizations, policymakers, donors, development institutions, international investors. I like that word, international investors, because you know now the essence of all these things is to see how you can have more money in your pocket or in your bank while impacting the lives of people. So that can be seen in terms of vertical scale up. But when we talk about the horizontal scale up, this has to do with the geographical spread and expansion to more people, more communities. You know, like I explained, the guy in Zungeru trying to get his product or his idea or his innovation to reach out to someone who is very far away from him. So agriculture generally in Africa is a rural activity. Right, so it's a rural activity, yes. We have our agricultural activities being conducted in different rural locations in Africa. And so if a young man has got a novel idea, he will want to take it out. You watch videos of agricultural activities in the developed countries, you see a lot of technology in play, and you want to see how that can also happen here in Africa. So we have a lot of bottlenecks that has really hindered us from getting to that level. But as things are evolving in Nigeria, so many young minds are beginning to think out of the box, Just in January, we had this Agribusiness Innovation Challenge, and then I saw a lot of innovations from young people, very good innovations. And then I started asking myself, do we have these people here in Nigeria? Of course, we have them in Nigeria. How do you use technology? How do you leverage on technology to improve agricultural production here in Nigeria or in Africa? How do you solve problems with your innovations, with your ideas, with this novel input from you into the food system? How do you change things in the food system? So these are very, very important. The things we should consider when we're talking about scale up. So like I said, I don't know how much time I have, but I can continue to talk till tomorrow, and Samirah, if you allow me. So can I continue?
I'll give you 2 more minutes.
Okay, great, Samirah, thank you. So just like I said, agricultural activities have been affected in a lot of ways. And so when you want to do the comparison between the young chap in Nigeria and the guy outside in developed worlds, developed countries, you see that a lot of things have impeded us. So certain factors need to be considered for successful scaling up. First and foremost, you must have that vision. That's number one. You must have that drive to do that. And then your idea, your innovation should be credible. When I mean credible, the innovation has to be sound with proven evidence. And your innovation should be also very relevant. You should be able to meet needs. You should be able to solve problems at hand, not just after the money. You know, money is important, but sometimes you may need to just look away from money and see how you can solve problems, and then money will come later. Then it should be very advantageous and then also very appropriate. These are very important things you need to look at if you really want to scale. And of course, partnership. Partnership is very important, and I know we're going to be talking about it later. Just like I said, in January, we had some young minds who had showcased their innovations in one of our programs. And then one thing we encouraged them, I just noticed while I was in the room during their demo day, I just noticed they all had solutions to their problems. So what I'm trying to say is Mr. A has got solution to Mr. B's problem. So with good partnership, we'll be able to scale successfully. And then, of course, very important, the enabling environment, of course. You know, the government policies, the structure we have on ground should be very encouraging. This is also very difficult for young innovators, if you like. Most times you have these very novel ideas, but the system would want to crumble you. So but a lot of development actors, a lot of persons are really working in this field to see how this enabling environments will be created, especially for agricultural innovations. And then very important, you want to scale, but you need to also build your own capacity. What are you looking at? What do you intend to achieve? You need to get yourself built in that area. You might be an undergraduate today, and then you have this strong idea on using artificial intelligence to help solve a particular problem in the agricultural space. And you might be currently studying something that has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. So what do you need to do? You need to start thinking about building your capacity, how you can expand your capacity, how you can learn more things as concerns artificial intelligence, because knowledge is power and knowledge is key. And then the last thing I know most people always see as number one is finance. You know, when you don't have the money, most times you tend you will be crumbled. So scaling up innovation basically is hinged on finance. And so a lot of development actors are also having this this programming we call financial literacy, access to finance, and then this will also help innovators to see how they can get some funds and then scale. But most times it's not easy. but it's always good you position yourself for such opportunities. When you go through all I have just mentioned, it gets you ready for such opportunities. There is this pathway to scaling up that I always refer to. It's just 3 words: innovation, learning, scale up. So what that means is you have the innovation, and then you need to learn, and then you scale up. So learning is very important as much as the innovation is very important, and your last bus stop, which is to scale up. So these are very important factors. A lot of strategies for scaling up abound, especially in our current situation. You know, in Africa, hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, we can hear you. Yes, so yes.
Okay.
When I am referring to a system that works and supports innovation in Africa, that means that we need to start from policy reforms. So we have a lot of policies. They're just policies. They are laying there as documents, but they are not being actively implemented by the policy agencies. There's not a lot of public-private partnerships that is happening in terms of getting these policies on board and trying to see how we can readdress issues that are not being addressed in the policies, or things that are not supporting ecosystem solution. Most of the times we have policies that have been written for 10 years and things have changed, times have changed. Agric is moving really fast. There's a lot of innovation, technology, solutions that are being used to make agribusiness more effective and production more efficient that we are not adopting yet. And those are the things that we need to take a look at the policies and incorporate into them and see how we can effectively implement them. Secondly, I'll talk about investments. So I've met with a lot of agric business entrepreneurs. I've met a lot with young minds that are willing to do a lot of things around developing ecosystem solutions. Even people in tech, they want to set up platforms that can be used by the stakeholders within the landscape. Unfortunately, they do not have access to resources, not only primarily money, but there are some other resources that are required to set them up. So a lot of investment needs to be done from the government agencies, Ministry of Agric, there's a Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investments, and so on. And from the private sector, we have the development organizations, private businesses, investors. We have private investors. For example, we have a sister company called Sahel Capital, and they primarily focus on investing in small to medium agribusinesses. So we need more of those initiatives, equity and investments to drive solutions, because we might have the knowledge, but if there's no working system and a lot of resources being put into place, it might be difficult for us to catch up with the developing countries or developing sector within even Africa. Finally, I'm going to talk about capacity building, and I'll use myself as an example. I studied agriculture in Bayero University, Kano, and up until when I graduated from school, I was never interested about taking on a career in agriculture, because I just simply understood that agric is about hoe and cutlass, and the best you could get is get a tractor. But life has gone beyond that. There's a lot of things happening in agriculture that doesn't mean that you should get a hoe or cutlass, or best case, use a tractor. There's precision agriculture happening. People are using drone systems to get work done. And it even increases your chances of getting more income, scaling your businesses. So if we are still going through the conventional and traditional ways of doing things in the sector, it might be difficult for us to truly scale as we desire as a country. We have a huge potential in the system. We have the labor force, we have the population, we have the resources such as land, but we need to build the capacity, especially of youth, and make people understand that there's an opportunity within the space. We need to go to the grassroots. I'm happy that there are a lot of students here we need to speak to the students for them to see like this sector and for them to see that there's a lot of opportunities within the landscape beyond going to the farm or being a lecturer in agric or being a teacher or just use mechanization to do one or two things, which is not the most efficient means of scaling agriculture. So there's a lot of capacity building that also has to go into the use of technology in agriculture. Everyone is leveraging AI these days, and artificial intelligence is looking like the future. So we need to really put in the work and efforts, crowding different partners from the public and private sectors to really scale agriculture holistically. I'm going to pause here, Samirah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've been smiling throughout. One of the reasons why I'm smiling is because when you said you went to Barra University, and I was like, yay, my alma mater. We went to the same school, and that's really nice. And two of you have said, both you and Godwin, Fisayo, you and Godwin have said two things that really is building capacity. The thing is, if you don't build capacity in whatever you're doing, you cannot scale. That's just the truth. And like you said, when I studied mass communication, but I've been in the agricultural space for over 5 years now. It's really amazing what you can do by actually building capacity. And thank you very much for that wonderful discussion. You've talked about policy reforms, public-private partnerships, which is really good, equity and investments. If we really don't have investments or cool ideas like precision farming, technology, drones will not be able to actualize it in Nigeria, especially in the Nigerian agricultural ecosystem. And within the ecosystem, we really need that technology to be able to scale. Currently in other countries like in the US, they're already looking at how to farm in mass. And we are still thinking of how to stop using ensuring our smallholder farmers use cohorts and cutlass, and that's the scaling we're talking about. And thank you very much for that. So my next question is going to go to, sorry, give me a second. So yes, so my next question is going to go to you, Mr. Joshua. Can you hear me, Mr. Joshua?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, awesome. What barriers do we need to overcome in order to scale agricultural innovation?
Yeah, thank you, Samirah. I mean, there are a significant amount of barriers, but I will start from the ones that I encounter or that I experience in the course of my work. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah,
okay.
We can hear you perfect.
Okay, great. So I was saying that I will start with the ones I typically experience in the course of my work. Now, when we talk about innovation, especially as it relates to agriculture in Africa, we're talking about doing certain things to scale. Allow me to give a bit of background and on a bit of an alarmist note, but just to properly, put us in context so we understand what we're up against. So from WFP statistics, everything I'll quote here from WFP statistics because I work with the World Food Program, more than 1 in 10 people go to bed hungry every night. 349 million people are facing acute food insecurity, and that's almost double the number, if not more, of people who did face that in 2020. And for those who don't know what acute food insecurity is, there are 5 stages according to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification for food security. So it starts all the way from food security and goes all the way to the other end, famine. And so acute food insecurity is stage 3. And 21% of Africa is undernourished, which is 2 times more in percentage terms than all other regions. And this takes into consideration the fact that Asia has way more people than Africa. So we understand what we're up against, right? It's a dire situation. There's a lot that needs to be done. As far as innovation goes, some of the barriers that we face, I mean, everybody talks about funding, but I'm going to start with funding and divide it into 3 or 4 categories. The first is lack of access to information. We have a program, a call for application, Africa Innovation or Agricultural Innovation in Africa for Cultural Resilience. The Innovation Accelerator, the WFP, put this out. And what I did realize is a lot of people do not even know about it, right? And this is a grant, amongst the many other grants that the WFP gives. And we have these kinds of opportunities, and you find out that most people don't even hear about it. So it's, first of all, the lack of access to information, because when we talk about funding, you also have to hear about these opportunities somehow, and so I think that's, first of all, the barrier with funding. And then there's the question of availability. Last year, Africa, got about $6 billion in funding, venture capital funding, which is 8% more than the previous year, but still less than 2% of the total global VC funding. And of that amount, which is very, very small figure, percentage-wise, Agtech, which is the agriculture and food tech space in Africa, was not even up in the top 5 sectors that was able to access, that amount of funding. In the last 5 years, between 2017 to 2022, that sector, Agtech, food tech, has only been able to raise $1 billion, which is less than the amount of funding that went to Agtech in just Q3 of last year. So the reason I'm giving this stats again is to give you some context so that you understand not only what we're up against, but how challenging the scenario is. So there's lack of access to information with regards to funding. There's lack of the availability of funding itself. And then when you're put in the front of these funding opportunities, how do you present yourselves? How do you tell your story? I've reviewed thousands of applications for funding at the UN, in venture capital, my venture capital life. And you find out that there are people who, submit applications, very poorly written applications, very poorly presented applications. You might be doing amazing work, but the difference in many cases between you and whoever gets a grant or funding is how you tell your story. And what I found is that we have a, deficiency when it comes to telling our story as African, entrepreneurs or co-founders and whatnot. So I think it's critical, really, for us to be able to express ourselves, answer the questions correctly. Sometimes you see people doing great work, but scoring has, the certain scoring criteria, and you can't really do anything about it if you want to be fair to everyone. And beyond the funding points, there are points around technology adoption. So we know everything about internet penetration challenges across the continent. We know everything about network access. We also know about trust deficits. I know that I'm not in Nigeria at the moment, but I've heard a lot about how the CBN policy, cashless policy, narrow design policy, how it really hit people hard, because a lot of people who are out there in the markets who are buying produce from the farmers, and the farmers themselves, many of them have in the past refused to get on board many technology platforms that would allow them, trade easier, sell their produce, or find the right market and all of that. Mostly because there's a deficit, trust in the technology infrastructure. They say, why do I need to do this? I'd rather, collect my money and all of that. And you see how it has affected the market with the whole situation, the narrow design situation. And then, of course, there's a lack of infrastructure, which we can do next to nothing about, because it's mostly a government thing. I'm not one of those people who believe that you can innovate for infrastructure. I think there's a limit to how far you can go with that. So, you have a dearth of social amenities, the rate of development is really poor. These are things that need to improve. I guess the best we can do in that regard is to keep calling it out and, pushing for changes with policy and holding our leaders accountable. And then to policy itself, we talk about policy limitations. I just mentioned the implementation of cash policy, how poorly implemented it was, but these kinds of things are some of the limitations or inhibitions to scaling agricultural innovations across Africa, but particularly in the Nigerian context.
Thank you so much for that amazing insight. And that's very true. I always used to think that maybe the agricultural sector has a lot of funding, but now I realize now they really have a lot of funding. And like you said, many people actually do not know how to get information about funding information and the rest. I think I'll just do one quick follow-up information for those in the audience, and I think maybe they would like to ask. I know that you've said so much about, lack of information. How, just in one sentence or so, how do you think that those listening should look or seek for that funding information that they really, really need? Or how best should they tell, like you said, telling your stories? Like, many people do not know how to tell their stories for, funding and scaling up. And everybody just wants to do whatever is the in thing. Like, if it's precision agriculture, everybody wants to do precision agriculture at that moment. Just one or two sentences. How do you think people should go about that?
Yeah, by virtue of being a founder or an entrepreneur myself, and in the past, and also because I've sat on investment committees and all of that, first thing I'll say is, like you alluded or hinted, you don't have to go with the flow to tell your story effectively. I absolutely hate buzzwords, for example, right? And when I say buzzwords, because they don't achieve anything. If I'm being frank here, if you say that your startup is an artificially intelligent before you say that, go and look up the meaning of artificially intelligent. If somebody's on the back end doing the work, it is not artificially intelligent, at least to the definition of it. So you don't have to use it. It doesn't make your application any stronger. It just occupies space and puts you less likely in consideration. So my point on telling your story is the factual, the emotive. Funding decisions are mostly made on emotions, no matter how technical people sound. At the end of the day, I want to connect with your story. I want to connect with what you're sharing. So tell me the story in a way that I find relatable, but also be articulate enough, be clear. You see people, they fill up a whole page with, I was this, I was that, when they tell you to tell them about themselves, and their founders. Tell us why you are the best qualified to be in this position, and not necessarily what you've accomplished as a person, which is great, but not contextual. So these are just some hints that I'm giving. Another thing I'll say is, at the end of the day, really, answer the questions. Like, look at the questions and answer them, literally. Don't get carried away by, the need to present yourself in a different way. Because I think what we need to understand, especially coming from the continent, and I'm passionate about this topic because currently I'm on an investment committee and I'm seeing a lot of applications, and I'm saying, hey, this service or this solution looks great, but I wish they could have presented themselves better. Come across as honest, be emotional. Tell me how it really is. It doesn't matter if you're making only $100 in revenue. That's fine. What I want to see is that you have the potential for impact and that you can scale. So the issue of information, I think there's no easy answer to it. Unfortunately, you have to search, you have to seek. I remember being a founder and trying to raise funding. I went on the internet, I made a list of everybody who was investing or interested in investing in the particular niche that I was, my startup was doing work in. It was a very, large list, over 1,000 investors. And I was peculiar about people's, areas of investments, because investors usually have that. So in the case of agriculture, for example, if you're looking for venture capital funding, I guess there are some agricultural firms. I don't know if Sahel Capital invests in agriculture, so I'm not going to put them on the spot. But in terms of like grants, there's IFAD, there's the World Bank, there's the World Food Program. Look up these people. If you have to turn on alerts for their LinkedIn posts, do it. If you have to put their websites on your bookmark, do it. There's no easy way, but they always have opportunities. I know that in the last year, for example, WFP has invested in giving grants, not even investments, to over 30 startups out of Africa, right? So you have to keep the pace with them, and there are a lot more organizations like them. But part of being an entrepreneur is that you have to put your head down and find these people, and follow them. And in the case of VC, be confident to reach out and tell them why, you're the next best thing after sliced bread.
Thank you so much for that. I just, like I said, I'm also learning. So I hope everybody was able to get one or two things from what you said, especially in telling your stories. Most of the time, we need to understand that when we're writing applications or selling ourselves or our business, it has business storytelling. I think everybody should go and take a course on business storytelling, especially to better write your business story, because it's not just about, like you said, it's not about how much you're making, what kind of product. It's also about what impact you're creating why are you doing what you're doing? Is this solving a solution? What solution is it solving? And how best are you doing that? And what makes you unique? And thank you very much for that. I'll go back to you, Ms. Fisayo. And the next question is to you. This question is on businesses in Africa struggle with supply chain management issues, such as inadequate communication and transportation systems, like Mr. Joshua said. How might supply chain inefficiency be reduced through innovation? And I think you would have to either counter or agree with Mr. Joshua on this.
Okay. I totally agree with everything that Joshua said. We have a lot of challenges, quite all right, around effective communications, logistics management, transportation systems in Africa, particularly in Nigeria. And I'm going to use a project that I currently work on as an example. I currently work on a project called Advancing Local Dairy Development in Nigeria, being implemented by Sahel Consulting, and it's a Bill and Melinda Gates funded project. We work with dairy processors and smallholder dairy farmers, primarily to increase local dairy sourcing and the use of locally sourced raw milk in Nigeria. So what we do is that we identify the smallholder farmers. We popularly call them herdsmen, pastoralists. And then we train them on improved dairy farming practices, support them by providing them with production resources like milk collection tanks, milk cans that they can use for collecting their milk and taking to the processor, and then the processor uptakes and processes into the end products that you see on the shelf, like Farm Fresh, L&Z yogurts, and so on. Now, there's a huge gap and challenge that we've encountered in the last 5 years working on this project, which is transportation systems, taking raw milk from the local farmers, from their communities, to the factories where the processors would collect the milk and offtake them. So what we realize is that these farmers do not have access to cold chain infrastructure, and because milk is quite volatile, highly perishable, it goes bad within one hour. And even in hotter climates in the Northeast, it's a shorter lifespan for the milk to go bad. So most times these farmers will take the milk to the processors and it's been rejected because of poor quality. That is where we identified the gap, and we've been working with processors to invest hugely in cold chain infrastructure. So what we've been doing through this project is identifying communities that are really committed to adopting improved dairy practices and participating effectively in the project, and centering a solar-powered collection center or even other energy-sourced collection centers within the communities where the farmers can bring their milk. It's been stored and aggregated, and after some days, the processors can come with a cold chain, cold tank, and that's the, what's it called? The truck, cold chain truck, and take it to their factory, which has grossly increased backward integration activities, increased the farmers' productivity, their income, and improved their livelihoods. And that is how important it is for us to look into the challenges and come up with solutions to address transportation systems, effective communication, and logistics. So firstly, we need development organizations, humanitarian agencies, quote and unquote, to shift their mindset from just giving to helping farmers or key actors invest. And why I said that is because I've seen a lot of projects that will just go to the Northeast, distribute food, and that's it. Tomorrow, when the food and money or whatever is being distributed is finished, what happens to the farmers? What happens to the producers? Sometimes you see, oh, we are distributing seeds and inputs to these farmers so that they can grow crops and have a better life. What happens when the farmers do not do these things right? How are we helping them support those businesses to ensure that beyond just giving them these resources, we are hand-holding them and providing them with the technical support that they need, as well as the business orientation to see beyond subsistence farming or extremely small-scale businesses that they will just do take some for their family and sell the excess. So that is the shift in development that we need in Africa. We need to bring in projects from a business perspective and not only to support humans or livelihoods. We need to be able to see that beyond the project, there's this sustainability, there's the existing relationship between key actors at every levels of the value chain, and they are providing support. There's continuity in the businesses of the smallholder farmers. They can still continue to supply milk, and there's a lot of things that can be done around that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've talked about several value chains from cold chain to other type of agriculture. Thank you so much for that answer. How is sustainability included in agricultural innovation? We're talking about innovation as in different value chain, and let's see how sustainability, especially with the likes of climate change and the rest, how is sustainability included in agricultural innovation? I'll direct this to all our panelists to have their last say, one sentence each before we go on a break. Thank you. We can start with Mr. Joshua.
Yeah, thank you. Try to make it quick. Sustainability in two senses. There's environmental sustainability and there's financial sustainability. From an environmental sustainability perspective, you want to make sure, of course, that the environment is taken into consideration. I referenced the program that we're working on currently. We're still trying to go through selection, agriculture innovation for climate resilience. But the point of that is to support innovations that are doing work to guarantee, efficiency of space and utilization of space, soil and biodiversity preservation, water conservation, and of course, how you can apply renewable energy to agriculture. So these are things to take into consideration as an agriculturalist, as an entrepreneur, when you practice in this space. And in terms of financial sustainability, I think we need to go back to the good old days of proper unit economics as the most effective way to drive impact, because I think we're too sold on the idea of like raising money or living off grants. But in the long run, many of these things are arguably unsustainable financially, especially when you come from our parts of the world where the chances of you raising any sustainable funding over a long period of time or even grants is under 2%.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Fisayo.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I totally agree with what Joshua said around us shifting our mindset from relying on grants and development projects, because it's not as sustainable as we think. Most of the times, even though we work on development projects at Sahel Consulting, we still we come from the management consulting perspective and mindset. And most of the times, I just find myself sitting and asking, are these things really sustainable? Do we need to continue like this in Nigeria to rely on funders and to help us develop certain sectors, especially agriculture, when we know that there's a huge potential of driving the economy through this intervention? So, as I said, we shouldn't continue to do that. We could look inwards and try to identify where we can pull out resources. There are a lot of gaps, there are a lot of opportunities. And as young entrepreneurs in the space, I don't think that you should sit back and continue to wait for grants or some sort of investments to do things. You can start small, start from where you are, do something little, and continue to increase skill and knowledge of whatever business you are working on or whatever value chains, and continue to look for opportunities that will help you build your capacity to help you scale that business beyond just money. There's a lot of people that have had access to grants and they've misused the opportunity. They've misspent the money because they don't have the understanding of budget management, financial management. They don't have the understanding of managing their resources, which is a huge gap that we've identified among young entrepreneurs. So we have a sister company called African Food Change Makers, and it's a hub that primarily drives the connection among businesses, agribusiness owners across Africa, either you are in agriculture, food, or nutrition. So that hub is a platform where you can have access to various information. There's a lot of lack of data that is happening within the landscape. So you should be able to look out for information, try to understand what's happening in the landscape, get mentors, try to be coached by someone that has gone through that path, where you could learn from their mistakes, and they would also share knowledge around what you can do differently to scale your businesses beyond relying on external factors like investments, grants, and donors.
Thank you so much to both of you. Two things I'll grab before we go on a break is that I think most of the time when we keep doing innovation, scaling up and trying to move forward. Nowadays, most researchers have realized that you still need to go back to the olden days. And now when it comes to environmental sustainability, especially in the agricultural space, researchers are now saying that we need to go back to regenerative agriculture and the rest in order to be able to be sustainable, because those days, yes, there are other ways to make sure that they're environmentally sustainable, but things like regenerative agriculture, crop rotation, water harvesting are things that would actually make our environment sustainable. So yes, no matter how the innovations we keep talking about, we also need to look at how we can innovate on things that used to work, especially for our context here in Africa. And like Mr. Joshua said, we've also still need to go back to the olden days of financial sustainability. Don't just rely on grants, and don't just rely on investment. And I think there's one thing that we need to keep and really think as businesses, and yes, we're creating impact. And in Thrive Agric, what we see is that grants are supposed to help reduce your costs. So it's not everything that I keep saying that not everything you apply for and not everything you should fit into. Make sure that whatever grants you're applying for fit into what you are already. Next session, which is on questions that is dear to my heart, and topic that is dear to my heart, which is collaboration and partnership. This is really key, like for you to be able to scale personally, work-wise, your business. You need to be able to understand better how we can collaborate and partner for everything that we currently do, especially when you're just starting up. So based on that, the first question will go to Mr. Jayéolá. Mr. Jayéolá, are you online? Are you with us? Okay, no problem. So we would go to, hi, Mr. Joshua. I would ask you this question. How can participants in the agricultural ecosystem work together, network to build value and spread their innovations, and then exist long-term and short-term plans?
Yeah, I guess that's the question on collaboration.
Yes.
I do think that a number of things are important as far as collaboration goes within the ecosystem. The first one is knowledge sharing. I feel like we need to realize that the agricultural space in Nigeria, I mean, in Africa, is still growing. It still has a lot more potential. At the beginning of my introduction to the presentation, I talked about the challenging situation we're in. And I think that for us to get to a point where we've attained a degree of stability, there has to be some coming together. And it doesn't really help so much for all the players within this space to consider themselves competition, because there's a lot of collective work to be done. So I think knowledge sharing is critical. We need to build a community where people share best practices, where people retain information and let it, dissipate to those who need them. And that's the first step, really, because if you know what person X or company X did that made them, get past a certain stage, you wouldn't make the mistakes they made. And I think it's ultimately good for the ecosystem. That's the first one. The second one is I think we need to build shared digital infrastructure. I don't know if anybody here is conversant with digital public goods, but the whole point of a digital public good is that you make available a software, a solution that is digitally compliant, but is also accessible, so that everybody can, leverage it, build on it. And I think this is important because we're still at a phase, like I mentioned earlier, where we're growing. And so people need to be able to plug into this API or get these kinds of data sets or access to this kind of information to properly plan, to properly implement. So through the agricultural value system, there's a lot of infrastructure building that needs to happen, just the same way it's happening in the healthcare space, with DHS 1 and 2 and so on. I also think we need to, as an ecosystem, create value loops where startups will work. I mean, there are people at different stages of the agricultural value chain, so whether it's production, it's post-harvest, logistics, supply chain, and all of that. People need to say, well, we're going to work together as a unit to deliver value to the end customer, and how can we do this? Okay, well, we are involved in the planting and the harvesting. Let's collaborate with another company involved in the production or processing of the agricultural produce. Let's collaborate with another company involved in the logistics and the supply chain and the cold storage equipment, and work as a unit so that at the end points, the customer is dealing with the units as opposed to having to relate with individual players. And while it might seem counterintuitive, considering that for us, it's a business, you have to be competitive and all of that. Ultimately, that's really what the ecosystem needs, and that's how it grows, because that way, that there are nothing is falling through the cracks, and it's a loop that is reliable. Because how do you feel when you're a farmer and you take your produce to the market and you don't care what happens from there? The customer is unable to deliver it or take it to, let's say it's a buyer taking it to the retail point. They're unable to, like 20% of it is going to waste. That is not true value. So if you collaborated, for example, with somebody who could get it to the end points, they're making their money, you're making your money, the customer is receiving value for money, and that's a loop as opposed to individual partners pinching what they can but not looking at the bigger picture. And finally, I want to talk about multi-stakeholder participation, and I'll give an example from our WFP portfolio. There's a venture called She Can. It's one of our bigger ventures as well. And what they do is, because of course on one hand there's a funding problem, on the other hand there are people who have some funds, whether it's crowdfunding platforms or microfinance institutions. And so She Can, rides on the relationship they have with the United Nations World Food Program, and gets into some partnerships with the country offices of the WFP on one hand, and on the other hand, they collaborate with microfinance institutions, crowdfunding platforms, and vets them. Now, when the vetting is done, because there's a focus on working with women, especially among smallholder farmers and MSMEs. And so they go to the country offices and say, well, we have some funders, crowdfunding platforms or microfinance institutions who are willing to give loans or whatever, type of financial interventions to these women. And do you have women, we can work with, or in whatever form that collaboration takes. But the point is, it's a multi-stakeholder participation. And ultimately, the end goal is that people get the funds they need to increase production, to increase efficiency, to positively impact the market and the ecosystem being the larger society and all of that. And on the other hand, the investors or the financiers get proper return on investments, because it's also through a reliable process and a credible platform, and everybody wins, you know. So I think these are some considerations we can have at the back of our minds when we go into these engagements, knowing that we can win together as opposed to winning bits and parts individually.
Thank you very much. That's really, really great. It's really key that even funders, like you said, funders nowadays, especially the WFP and other funders, are trying to create collaborations and partnerships to fund projects, and also ensure that implementing partners also fund implement projects as a consortium. So most of the time, it's like, in order to ensure that both the funding, the technical ability, the technical expertise, and other things come together as a consortium to ensure that whatever is being worked on has a higher chance of succeeding. And I think it's really key that, like you said, we need to build that community. I know the fintech sector has that strong community. The tech sector in general has that strong community, but the agri sector needs that strong community to build for knowledge sharing, building knowledge sharing, ensuring best practices and the rest. Thank you very much for that. I would ask, okay, Mr. Jayéolá, okay, I'll go to the next question. Okay. So I'll go to the next question, and then I'll come back to that first question. Or, yes, so Mr. Jayéolá is currently not online, and I can see that we have experts within his team from the Ventures platform who can answer that same question, because they are working so much in collaboration as a pack and as an ecosystem. And I think Ruben needs to mute himself. Thank you very much. So I'll ask that some questions to someone from the Ventures Park team. Who I think I'll go with someone from the Ventures Park team. Is anyone here?
Yes, Samirah.
Okay, yes. So I'll ask that question
Samirah,
because
hi Samirah, I'm here also. I imagine that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Now welcome back. So I'll ask that same question because I know that you guys deal with a lot of collaboration, especially for the fact that you have a pack that hosts several tech startups within your space. So the question goes, like I've stated before, how can participants in the agriculture ecosystem work together, network to build value and spread their innovation, exist long-term and short-term plans?
Okay, thank you, Samirah, for that question. I would say that from what we've experienced over the years, working with all of these startups, we've realized that one of the reasons why you find the kind of relationship that you find among the people in the fintech subsector and maybe other subsectors is that they recognize that they're faced with the same challenge, right? And that they need to work together to solve that problem. So what you find is it's no longer a thing of survival of the fittest, but it's a thing of, we have this common challenge. We need to get CBN to reduce the bar in their requirements to be able to get, for example, the license. We need to be able to have certain APIs, things like that, so you need to make our stuff work. So we need to speak in one voice. With the agri sector, there needs to be that kind of awakening to realize that we're solving a problem that we're faced by the same challenges, and we need to work together. That's only one part. The second part would be so first of all, we have the same problems, right? And we need to solve it together. The second one will be commitments towards one goal. And that's one of the reasons why I like initiatives like the United Nations World Food Program, things that would help us recognize that this is a common challenge and we need to work together to solve it. Recognizing that across the entire agricultural value chain, right, there are different challenges. If we decide to tackle those challenges, whether it's in the cost of inputs, whether it's the cost of the processing, or whether it's in the yield, whichever part of the value chain that we've also been, the goal remains one. I think that that's one of the ways that would be able to achieve that. For us at Ventures Park, one of the things we've done is to, rally everyone together, help them to understand these things, and help them to also provide access to solution. Let them know that okay, the solution is actually here, and this is the benefit of all of us working together. So it's not just about finding these very brilliant ideas. It's about also helping them to recognize the roles that other people will play in achieving their success. So it's a whole lot, right? It's a whole lot. But I think that that's one of the major things that we can actually point to as a critical success factor in achieving
Thank you so much for that amazing answer. And that's true. There's a whole lot we can do to ensure that there's collaboration and partnerships within the agricultural sector. And ensure that they say two heads are better than one. And that's very true. So I'll go to the last question before we open it. I'm very sure I can see already that people are already eager to ask their questions during the Q&A. So I would ask one last question and open the floor to members of those listening to ask their questions. And so this question will go to Fisayo. How can we encourage more women to build companies in the agricultural sector instead of participating at a lower level of value chain? This is a really, really good question.
Okay, so this requires a lot of intentionality and sensitization. I said that because most times when we are coming up with solutions or opportunities, we tend to forget about women inclusion and the balance among women. So for example, when we have project that focuses on supporting cassava farmers, there's this assumption that cassava farmers are mostly men, and there would be nothing in the scope of the project that directly attends to women's needs when it comes to cassava farming. There's no intervention around women inclusion and empowerment. And these are the things that we can address. We can address this by ensuring that for every activity, partnerships, collaboration that we do, we consider gender inclusion and we prioritize women empowerment. I'm still going to use a project I work on as an example because women empowerment is at the core of what we do at Sahel on the Aldin program. So what we do on Aldin is that we work with dairy farmers, and traditionally the women are the ones that wake up in the morning to collect milk from cattle and process into Furad and Nono and all of those products and take to an open market to sell. So now we are changing that narrative by saying that you don't need to hawk your products all day long to make some small amount of money. Rather, the women can collect the milk and supply through a channel, for example, through the aggregators, through the milk collection centers that have been set up by the processors. And they now have more time on their hands to explore other businesses. For example, we have a program where we form the women into self-help groups. So for our self-help groups, we try to put into consideration the culture within the northern part of Nigeria where we work, to ensure that we have effective participation of women. So we have self-help groups that are mixed when it comes to gender, and we have women-only self-help groups. And we tend to see that the women are more, they're more relaxed, and you hear their voice more when they are in their women-only self-help groups. They have the opportunity to take leadership roles, being ESCOs of the groups, and represent their communities in terms of advocating at local levels, at their local government levels, at state levels, or representing their communities in different interventions or activities that are happening around agricultural development. Another thing we need to consider is to increase women's access to more resources and finance, because most times they tend to have lower access to finance than the other gender. So what we can do is that if we are, we have to come up with indicators that ensure that we are tracking that women have equal access to resources and finance to support their agribusinesses. Finally, we need to train women in, there's this unconscious bias around not including women in some activities like mechanization, the use of technology, and so on. We need to be very intentional about training women on the use of these things, and including them in agri-technology, in innovations that would support their businesses and even their livelihoods and that of the communities and their households where they live. Finally, women need to have a voice and be able to make decisions, critically involving them in activities that helps them to make decisions independent of the men of the household. So in this case, you need to also engage men as champions to advocate for women participating in decision-making activities, either at household level or at community level, or even at national level as a whole.
Thank you very much. I think it's really key that, like you said, it's really key that we ensure that there are more women who build companies in the agricultural sector. Reason being that research shows us generally that we have over millions of women in the agricultural sector who participate in agriculture. But when you look deep into that research, you realize they are just the menial workers who do the cleaning, the cleaning of the and cleaning of the crops after harvest. So you realize that they are not actually in the top value chain, but in the bottom value chain. And we have low participation of women in actual farming. And when you realize, and when you dig deeper into that research, you also realize that the reason that we have low women participation in the agricultural value chain in general is because agriculture, a typical example in Nigeria, agriculture is mostly farmed in northern Nigeria. And for us to be able to ensure women inclusion in those states, we actually need more women to build more companies, because it's then easier for women to tailor solutions to target women, because we understand how best we can, target women. And you also realize that for you to be able to attract more women, women farmers, women within your value chain, you need women agents, women advocates. And so for us to be able to do that thoroughly, we need to stop thinking as business as usual. We're start ensuring that we have founders. And I think it's really key that when you're starting a company, it's really key that if you're looking for a co-founder, why not look for a woman co-founder? We are very smart. Let me not say, yeah, we are very smart. And so we need to create that ecosystem and that space for us to thrive, in order for us to include and ensure that the agricultural ecosystem develops more and we have women inclusion. So thank you very much, Fisayo, for that answer. Before we go into the Q&A, for that question, I really think we need to also talk more. So, Mr. Jayéolá and Mr. Joshua, do you have one or two things to say about women inclusion on building companies? I can start with you, Mr. Jayéolá.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I would say that it's actually very important for us to begin to pay a bit more attention towards inclusion, and it's not just going to happen by accident. There has to be like deliberate efforts. There has to be all over the world. We're beginning to realize that it's like having to carry a load on top of your head with only one hand when you actually do have two hands, right? It makes no logical sense for you to want to build a society, to build an economy, to build an industry, a subsector, relying on the skills and the abilities of only one gender, knowing fully well that there's another gender with their own giftings and enablements and superpowers that can actually come together and work together with the other gender to be able to achieve some level of success. So I think it's critical that we begin to pay attention to that, and deliberately so. I would also say that we're not just going to, it's not just going to happen that, you know, we're going to now maybe out of pity or just create a seat at the table for you, right? I think that women also need to begin to realize that they're actually as important in the conversation, in the scheme of things as the other genders. So we need to drag a chair and actually get ourselves a seat at the table. And this is where conversations like this begins to become very important, where, you know, we begin to enlighten and educate women, give them the opportunity to be able to also share their thoughts on the common challenges that we face. And also, like I said earlier, deliberately so, begin to, you know, train them, build capacity in them to be able to also hone the skills and their natural giftings to be able to contribute significantly to the ecosystem. So yeah, and that's one of the things that we're doing at Venture Spark, right? A lot of the programs, initiatives that we participate in, we try as much as possible to ensure that we have equal, if not even more, women participation, because things are already skewed as teams towards the men. So creating that deliberate platform to be able to empower them and allow them to be able to, you know, their voices to be heard and their own contributions to be also taken, something that we've done intentionally, and we intend to do at a larger scale in the future. So that will be my contribution to the question.
Thank you. Before we go to Mr. Joshua, your 2 cents on that, I'm still on you, Mr. Jayéolá. There was a question I asked when you were not around, I think you had technical issues right then. So I would like to ask you that question now. How Innovations Hub may assist innovators in validating, scaling, and telling their stories more effectively. I think this is really, really important, especially for women who want to start their organizations.
All right, thank you again for that question. Right, I think that that innovation hubs very strategically positioned in such a way that they are the rallying point of, you know, and that's why it's called a hub, right? If you understand the true meaning of a hub, it's like a rallying point. It's like the center, the epicenter of all the things that need to happen. So we cannot even speak so much about innovation without, you know, putting into proper consideration the roles that the hubs have to play. In validating these ideas, in supporting these innovative ideas, the hubs have to rethink their model, right? One of the biggest challenges, and this is just an inside secret, it might be an open secret, but many people may not be aware. One of the limiting factors that hubs have in being able to extend support to a lot of startups, innovative startups, is their own business model. You know, being able to, because even if you're not for profits, you're also not for loss, right? So you're worried about how to sustain your business. So the extent to which you're able to provide support to these startups becomes somewhat limited, because, you know, you have to think about, you know, we need to do things that would really, you know, that will really bring money. And sometimes, seemingly so, it looks like making impact and making money are two parallel lines that never meet. But I think that innovation hubs need to begin to rethink their business model in such a way that it can actually make impact, because it's in the impact that the money is, and that's on the one side. Second thing is about priority setting, right? The priorities should now come to, like I said when I answered one of the questions earlier, I said it's not about survival of the fittest, but of the weakest. Innovation hubs should begin to have a strategy. They should be more intentional. There has to be a plan that, you know, effectively looks at the gaps and sees how we can solve or block those gaps. And that will now segue into being able to make data-driven decisions, right? So it's not just decisions based on what brings in money for us right now. It's not just decisions based on, oh, this is the amount of money that we have right now. Or let's just open a space and let's just exist. Let us have a Me Too kind of innovation hub. To be looking critically at where the gaps exist and making deliberate efforts to be to plug those gaps, and also being intentional enough and doing the hard work to be able to rally around the support, to do the work that you need to do to be able to galvanize support from the private sector, from the government, from different other players, to ensure that you are able to solve the problem that you've identified. So I think that's one of the major things. Just so that I don't even take too much of the time, I think that's one of the major things. Other things would be to also improve on their technical skills and competence with working on support. You cannot give what you don't have. A lot of these individuals come to the clubs with high expectations. So sometimes, case in point, Venture Spark, right? You can literally find people walking into the gates of any of our campuses, whether in Lagos or in Abuja, with nothing but an idea, and they're looking for those ideas to be converted from products to concepts to markets. If we do not have the competence, we don't have the technical skills, the capacity, in terms of the EIRs, for example, the mentors, or in terms of the faculty that handles, you know, the incubator programs, accelerator programs, or the mentors, whether they're founder mentors, expert mentors, or in-house mentors, whichever category you fall into, what you find is that those ideas will not even be able to move. Whatever efforts that those people make will not be able to significantly move the needle towards achieving the objective of taking that idea beyond the concept. So building capacity is actually really important, and that's one of the reasons why we invest heavily on capacity building. We also try to rub minds, and we're members of AfriLabs, for example, and there's always capacity building program every once in a while. So we usually participate in those kinds of capacity building programs just to even see what our hubs are doing, how do we collaborate with them, look into the industries, how do we get more mentors, are there more knowledge areas, how do we challenge ourselves to be able to adjust to the very quick changing sector. There's a whole lot, but those are very critical. Building capacity, working on our business models, pay attention to what really matters, setting our priorities right, and understanding that what we're doing, even though it may not seem to be profitable in that sense, but we're solving problems that are worth solving. Yeah, so that's it. Really.
Thank you very much for that amazing answer. Mr. Joshua, I'll come back to you later because of time. So maybe you add that your thoughts on your 2 cents on women inclusion in your last statement. So I'll open the floor for Q&A. We can do these 2 ways. You can ask your questions in 2 ways. You can post your questions on the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call you. And you can direct your question to a particular person or generally, and we'll be able to answer the question. So it's time for question Q&A sessions. So let's have the questions really in here. Like I said, you can raise your hand up and I'll pick you, or you post your questions in the chat box and I'll read it out. And can direct it to one of the speakers or just a general question. Okay, so Jason Adebola, sorry if I pronounce it wrongly, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. So my question is a general question on agricultural development in Nigeria presently. Now, I was part of a webinar some weeks ago in which we talked on issues in which are affecting entrepreneurs in delving into agriculture in Nigeria. And one of those things was the political situation in the country. So my question is, how are entrepreneurs supposed to cope with the situation in the country? Because sometimes you have the right business plan, you have the right resources, but the problem is the government is impeding your progress. You want to venture into a business, but its policies, the corruption and everything is just not allowing you to get to that stage in which you need to, so that you can grow. So how are we supposed to deal with the challenges being posed by our own government in agricultural development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to answer that question? Joshua, Jayéolá, Fisayo, who wants to answer the question? Yeah,
I mean,
Joshua.
I could take a stab. What you're asking essentially is how you can, if I understand your question correctly, Jason, is how you can continue to build in spite of the government's inadequacies. I guess that's what you're asking. This is one of those realities where there is really not that much you can do around it, to be honest. What is important is that you build and you, as much as possible, try to isolate yourself, if you can, from policies that might not be favorable to your project or your venture, your idea. And one of the ways to do this is to have geographical spread. So for example, there's a reason why companies get incorporated in Delaware. This is not necessarily in line with what you're asking, but this is an example. There's a reason why companies get incorporated in Delaware in the US, because it's easier to raise money when you're incorporated in Delaware than when you're incorporated in Nigeria. This is a statistical fact, right? So you can't really ask the government to behave because we know how that fares in Nigeria. But what you can do is to try to, as any business would, insulate against risk. And so when you're going into your building process, you need to determine, you know what a SWOT analysis is. You need to determine, or you know what a pestle analysis is. What are your risks? What are the threats to your business? And how can you insulate yourself from that? In some cases, it will be, well, maybe we need to have a branch in another country. Maybe we need to incorporate elsewhere. Maybe we need to save our money in dollars. Maybe we need to, even if it's not outside of Nigeria, maybe, because of insecurity, you want to have your farm in a place that is relatively stable. So I guess these are things to consider. But the bottom line of what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, we need to hope and advocate for a better government, because when it really gets down to the base level, you cannot innovate outside or beyond a government that has refused to work. You can only insulate yourself from the risks.
Thank you very much. Who else wants to add to that?
Samirah, I think there was a question before the Q&A session from Abel about opportunity.
Okay, please, can the person repost it? Because my chat cleared up.
So we'll do that now in the chat for you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. While we wait, okay, no problem. Okay. Sorry, I muted myself. The question has been posted. For that first question, I think is really key. Does anyone, Jayéolá, do you have any addition to that with what Joshua said? If not, we can move to the next question, because that is really affecting business in Nigeria. We can look at situations like in Lagos State, where policy really disrupted an entire business that was booming. So how do businesses try to, like Joshua said, risk management and the rest? What else can we do to mitigate those kind of risk, or what can businesses do to ensure that they don't fall into this kind of risk?
I'll take another stab. Piggyback on what Joshua mentioned when he said that you cannot innovate your way out of all these problems, right? It's actually very critical. I think that the other part to it would be to say that regardless of how things may seem with governments, policies, and all of those things, etc., you will find that the bulk of the time, those policies are not even intended, because if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, sometimes, not all the times, they're not intended to frustrate businesses. Sometimes just be a lack of clear vision. It could be a lack of clear vision on the part of the government, and they may not know the impact of what they're doing. And that's the reason why people need to come together. That's why there needs to be clusters. That's why there are associations. That's why we have innovation hubs. And innovation hubs, some of them have very strong government relations and things like that. I'll take a case in point, the Nigerian Startup Act, which Ventures Platform, Ventures Park, were very critical supporters of pushing from behind, literally practically being the non-flashier partner in executing. You know, for the longest time, we had government make policies that were counterproductive, and people kept complaining until the tech ecosystem came together. Until leaders in the ecosystem began to rally around each other to say, look, guys, there might be an elephant in the room, and we need to stop pretending like we're not seeing this. If care is not taken, these things are going to continue to happen, and it's going to jeopardize all of the things, all of the work we've built, and even impede on any further progress that we're going to make. We start doing something, and then we began to realize that we need to come together, and then from one WhatsApp group becoming an entire movement, and then before you knew what was happening, we began to engage governments. When we began to engage government, that's where we did realize that governments did not even entirely know the consequences of what they were doing, right? So we had to get into the room with them, have conversations with them, allow them to see the implications of those policies and decisions they were making and how it affects them. You need to think in big picture, and especially when you're dealing with government, the certain skill sets that you must have, right? You need to help them see the big picture. You need to tell them that, look, we need to survive, we need to thrive, we need to succeed, because when we succeed, that's when you can get more taxes, and that's when you can have more revenue, right, as a government. But if you come up with these policies and these policies frustrate us and kills our businesses, there's no tax for you, there's nothing for you to tax. You need to explain that to them, because again, they are politicians, not all of them are technocrats, they may not even understand the intricacies. So, but that's one of the things that we realized, and that's why there needs to be clusters. So I recommend for people who are building to belong to clusters, to belong to associations, to also leverage the opportunities that innovation hubs provide, to be able to handle them through all of these challenges.
Thank you very much. So I'll go to the next question, and before I say that, I'll also say that sometimes you need to have two products so that in case one policy affects one, the other one is still going to work while you try to mitigate against the policy. And so the next question I'm saying is, please, are there precision farming companies, before I read the last one, please, are there precision farming companies in Nigeria? I would answer that, yes, and precision farming is very, very large. So it all depends on the type of precision farming. So for example, in Thrive Agric where I work, we do a lot of precision farming. So precision farming entails the advice that you would give smallholder farmers. So a typical example would be that in Thrive Agric, before we do any farming, we mark the lands and we do soil test analysis. And so a precision farming system will be that after that, you collect the data and then ensure that whatever advice that you're giving on inputs, on how best to plant on that land is all the process of precision farming system. So then we blend the fertilizers. When we blend the fertilizers with our partners, those fertilizers are then blended to suit specifically for those farmers in those localities, all those process and precision farming systems. And then you now advise the fertilizer and the farmer on this your plot of land based on the soil analysis and the testing and the geomapping that we did, would advise you that you do two, let's say urea, whatever practices. And then during the farming system, some people use their geomapping coordinates to do drones to check the growth of the plants and everything. So all those are precision farming. So yes, most of the companies in Nigeria, the Agritech companies in Nigeria actually do precision farming. Yes, so we do, especially Thrive Agric. So I'll go to the next question is, what opportunities are available for Agritech solutions, real issues, and considering scaling their solution with tech? I will give, I'll say Fisayo or Joshua can pick it up 2 minutes, but I know that this question has been answered before, especially when Joshua was talking about the opportunities that several WFP and other funding NGOs are giving. But I'll give either Fisayo or Joshua, one of you can take that question, but we have please take it in 1 or 2 minutes. We have short time left.
I don't know if Fisayo wants to take it. No?
Hi, Fisayo.
Yes, so about
Okay.
funding opportunity, I earlier mentioned African food chain makers as the non-profit arm of Sahel Consulting. And on that platform, it's being posted on a weekly basis what funding opportunities are available for agri entrepreneurs. As Joshua mentioned earlier, funders have different focus areas, so you have to keep tab on that to really read, and wherever you see any focus area that aligns with your business, you can take the opportunity and apply. But when you are going to apply, ensure that you have value to put on the table to help you with your application. I'm going to drop the link to the platform somewhere out on the chat box. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fisayo. The next question is, what opportunities are available to startups dealing with post-harvest management and market access? Joshua, you can answer that, especially that's the area of WFP.
I can speak from an innovation and a fund/donor perspective. I think that there are, because post-harvest management, amongst the WFP priorities in terms of the challenges we try to, support, or people working around those challenges that we try to support, post-harvest losses are a critical part. Market access is also super important. So if the question is around opportunities like funding and support, then I could say yes. The WFP occasionally funds ventures or startups in that space. We have the regular WFP SDG 2 portfolio. Every year they take in sometimes up between 5 to 10 startups and give grants of about $100,000. But there are also other opportunities within the WFP system and some other portfolios as well. We have at scale-up level, we have at innovative finance level. So what I will say is, if you check out the WFP innovation acceleration page, you'll see what opportunities exist. I'm going to leave it in the chat now, but I can only speak for WFP. I'm sure there are other organizations. There's the Agricultural Alliance, there's FAO, there's IFAD, and I did mention earlier, there are some interventions by the World Bank and the IFC as well. So you need to look them up, but I will share the WFP link in the chats right now.
While we are filling the form out now, I would like to acknowledge our speakers, our panelists. First of all, I would like to appreciate Samirah Bello, who was the moderator for this session. Thank you so much for, taking charge of this entire conversation. I mean, it was really engaging. There was not a dull moment throughout the 2-hour session. I can't believe that we even shot over the time. I also like to acknowledge Mr. Joshua Okpata from the World Food Program. We appreciate you for carving out time from your busy schedule to be a part of this session. Some people in the chat board had asked about your contact information because they want to, but I would say if you are open to, sharing any of your information, maybe your LinkedIn, you can drop in the chat box. Otherwise, I would say you guys should still join our community because access to these kinds of people would, come a lot more during the course of the year from Venture Spark. So it's essential that you jump on the link, the form link, and connect with us. I would also like to acknowledge Fisayo Kayode, the manager of Sahel Consulting. Thank you very much for all the juice that you dropped for us during the course of this session. It was really, really insightful, and it was great to learn about the work that you do at Sahel Consulting. I'd also like to appreciate Professor Bamiro in absentia. He was not able to stay on the call for the entire duration of the session, but we appreciate. I would also like to acknowledge Mr. GODWIN EHIABHI of the GAME Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining. He also had to drop off earlier in the call. And last but not the least, I'd like to appreciate the General Manager of Venture Spark, the head of family, Mr. Jayéolá Okuazun. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it was not convenient to join from outside the country, different time zone and all, but we appreciate you joining the session and, delivering so many insights regarding how innovation hubs can support startups within the ecosystem. And we look forward to much more engagement. So as I said earlier, if you haven't filled the form, kindly take time to do so. All right. Mr. Joshua has dropped his details in the chat box for those who asked earlier, so you can connect with him. I also mentioned earlier that we'll be having subsequent webinars, and one of such webinars is the Clean Tech, which is coming up on the 4th of April, just next week, Tuesday. And we'll be sharing communications about it on our social media pages. Please do well to follow us and register once the link comes out. And yeah, I hope by now we've all filled the form. I'm trying to keep the conversation going so that we are filling the form as I speak, but I don't want to keep us longer than we already have. So, okay. I'd just like to, with that, bring the call to a close. Yes, so once you fill the form, we would have your contact information, that's your email address especially. We'll be able to share these opportunities as they come with you, so that you don't miss out on anything that we're doing at the Ventures Spark and also within our larger community, the Ventures platform in general. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Once again, my name is Ajibike Jimo, the head of programs at Venture Spark, and it's been a delight having the session with you. Do enjoy the rest of your day and have a good week ahead. Bye for now.